Hi, happy Monday. It is so crazy to me that this time last Monday is when we were like getting on here and talking about how the podcast launched. So thank you. It has been amazing. I can't even explain how freaking grateful I am for all of your podcast support, your shares, your comments, your downloads. Like, it has just been incredible. The messages that Monica and I have gotten, the reviews, like, we are so grateful. So grateful. So thank you. Just thank you. If you're waiting or wondering when the next one is going live, it will be Wednesday. Very excited to continue to share that, to continue to share Monica's journey, but just know that you guys reaching out, you sharing, with us, your experience of it, you writing your reviews, sending messages has just been, like, we've just had the best week. So thank you. Hey, Natalia. Okay, let's do this thing. So I'm like so excited and so a little nervous for this live stream. But the reason I'm doing it is because I feel like I've been talking to clients about this a lot lately. And I am such a believer, like, one of the deepest values in my business is to like walk your talk, to own what you're telling your clients. Like, not that I do every single thing I tell my clients to do, because we have different businesses, but if I'm like routinely finding myself telling clients something that I'm not also doing, like, there's a problem there, and I have to deal with that, because I always want to be congruent and walking my own talk. And so this has been a conversation that's come up with clients recently, and it's made me reflect, like, well, am I doing that enough? And the answer was no. And so here we are. So there's a quick little tip. If you're telling your clients to do something repeatedly, that's probably also for you. And you want to be willing to do all the things that you're telling your clients to do. When I used to work in the nonprofit world, I had like a really big team, and sometimes I would like I had an office, and they were kind of set up in like a big open kind of like cubicle setting, and I would like go out into the cubicles and like sit on client calls with them and do stuff like that, because I would be like, I'm not going to ask you guys to do something that I'm not also willing to do. And I've like brought that mentality into coaching. And so anyway, that's a very long-winded way for me to say that's why we're here. Kim says, hi, can't stay on, but so excited to watch the replay. Oh, thanks, Kim. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about owning your own shit, shall we? Here's the thing. I titled this, like, this is one of the scariest live streams I've ever done. And I did that because I want you to know that it is and that there's no reason to pretend otherwise. But there's not a reason for me not to do it because of that either. And so what I mean by that is, like, I think that so often if we're not clear on that piece, if I don't say, this is one of the scariest live streams I've ever done, then you don't know that. And so you're like, well, it must be so easy for Lacey. Does that make sense? And that's where it gets confusing. So part of why I wanted to say that is because it's true, because it is one of the scariest live streams I've ever done. And that's okay. And it's not going to stop me. Does that make sense? So if that resonates with you, give me a little something. Give me an emoji. Give me some encouragement here. Give me a comment and tell me that you're going to do this too. Because ultimately, again, like, just because something's scary, it's not a reason not to do it. But also, I think that we just have to be more honest with each other that, like, this shit can be scary, and that's okay, right? Cool. So it's scary. It is what it is. But here's what I know to be true, and what I've been saying to clients recently, which is that if you don't own your own stuff, no one will do it for you, right? If you are not taking a stand for your own brilliance, your own uniqueness, your own expertise, no one is going to be there like waving the flag for you and going, Lacey's so brilliant. I don't know if you know, but she's unique in all these ways, and she does all these unique things. Certainly, I feel like I've had, hey, Melanie, thank you for joining me. Certainly, I feel like I've had a ton of support on the podcast and a ton of people sharing, but like, nobody's going to own that for me more than I can. Nobody's gonna like be the one flying the flag if I'm not. Does that make sense? Hey, Andrea, thank you for joining me, and thank you so much for sharing on my post today. It was so lovely what you shared and so beautiful. So anyway, that's the first thing. You gotta own your own shit because nobody's gonna do it for you. Can your audience promote you? Can you have amazing reviews? Can people market for you? Certainly. Are they ever gonna do it more than you are? No. Are they ever gonna do it more than you're willing to? No. Right? So here's the initial thing. I have like such a desire right now, if I'm just being perfectly honest, to like caveat this with a few things. Like I want to be like, but just so you know this, and also so you know this, and also so you know this, right? And listen, if we're being real honest, I probably will do that at the end, but I'm not actually going to start that way because it's really not necessary to, and it's just not relevant to what I'm going to tell you. But I think that, again, like we're just trained to kind of like caveat our own brilliance. Like, can I get an amen, if you know what I mean? Like we're like, well, I'm going to like share all this stuff about how I'm awesome, but just so you know, X, Y, Z. Like how bad do we all want to do that sometimes? So in the spirit of calling myself out, I'm not going to do that. Okay? I'm not going to do that. But like if you feel that sometimes where it feels like, well, anytime I want to brag, I have to like caveat that with a bunch of shit, or I have to put a lot of disclaimers up, or also share a bunch of bad shit. You don't have to do that. So we're not going to do that here. Although I might at the end. We'll see how I feel. No promises. Okay, amazing. So what I want to tell you is this, and what I want you to figure out for yourself will come from this too. But what I want to tell you is this. I am truly a thought leader in this industry. If you're listening to this, I hope you feel like that's true for you too. And I hope you feel like you can get on live stream and own that. And if you don't, I hope this live stream helps you to do that. But I like believe with my whole heart, like top of my head, tip down to the tips of my toes, like I am a thought leader in this industry, right? I have been in this business for around 3.5 years. So it'll be 4 at the end of July, I guess. So let me share some of like what's happened in that time frame. Oh wait, let me also read comments first. Andrea says, yes, the humble brag is so not fetch anymore. Girl, I agree with you. Sarah says, hey Lacey, amen. I always put up warnings when sharing client wins. Ooh, Sarah Pelk, what do you mean by warnings? Tell me more about that. And Andrea's with caps for emphasis, right? Like it's so funny because like I'm gonna go off on a tangent for like 2 seconds, but in this industry, I think the pendulum swings so far and there's like not enough middle ground. And what I mean, the pendulum swings like all the fucking way over here to where like we're bragging about things that aren't even true because we're putting such a spin on them, like to make it seem sexy for marketing. Or we're all the way over here where like every time we're gonna share something amazing, we wanna put like 5 like caveats to it and we wanna put a warning. I wanna know what you mean by that, Sarah. And like all this stuff. And it's like, fuck that. Like, can we just be in the middle sharing shit that's true? Owning shit that's true. You know what I mean, right? So here's what I'm gonna own. I'm gonna own some shit right now, you guys. And I want this to serve you not only because you're gonna have to sit through me bragging, but because I want it to be an example of how you can own your shit and where that line is, right? So the first thing that I did when I came into this industry was, again, this was like 4 years ago, y'all. July. I feel like I was one of the first, if not the first person in our space talking about a content plan, right? Like everybody was saying put out content, but nobody gave you like any specifics of that. Nobody was using a content plan that I know of. Nobody was talking about it. It was not a thing. In fact, what I initially had was I had this opt-in on messaging and I had this like little paragraph in it about how I think about content and about categories and themes and whatever. And so many people asked me about that I was like, fuck, that's what everyone needs. That's so fascinating. I really just created my own content plan so that I could put shit out and not be overwhelmed all the time, so that I had some kind of system to it. Like, but what was so cool about it is I completely and entirely came up with that plan myself. Like, I wasn't like, oh, like I took 5 courses and now I'm making a content plan. Like, I was just like, I need something to share this content. Here's what makes sense in my brain. Let me do it, right? And then now content plan is such a normal thing. I hear people talking about categories and themes all the time. And I'm like, hey, what up? But here's what's different. I'm probably going to say this 6 times during this live stream, but I want to say it, and it's so true, which is like, I'm not making that wrong, right? Like, I'm not like saying that it's bad that someone talks about content plan now. Like, I don't own that. You know what I mean? But what I will own and what I need to own more of is that I was one of the first people doing that. And I was like, probably like the first in our industry really talking about it in that way. Now listen, could someone come back to me and be like, look, I can show you in my blog post on this date that I talked about it before then? Sure, I don't know, probably 100% sure, right? But what I mean is like in my space, in my sphere, in what I was seeing, nobody was saying that, and it was completely like self-created, self-taught. So again, it's okay if other people are using that term. That's not like a bad thing. But where it gets bad for us is when we're not owning it and then we're pissed that other people are sharing it. So if I wasn't owning, hey, I'm like one of the first people that even came up with this, and also it was like completely self-created, and then someone else was sharing it, that's when I would be pissed. Does that make sense? Like, it's not triggering when you're owning, like, I have a lot of thought leadership in this industry around content planning. It's only triggering when you're not owning it, and then you see other people talking about it, and you're like, well, fuck. No, you have to like own your stuff around it, right? Sarah says, so morning, I mean like, hey, this client got results because she showed up for herself and yada, yada, yada. So maybe disclaimer is a better word. No, I get what you mean, Sarah, though. It's like, you have this like amazing result and you want to be like, but don't worry, like be careful because you may or may not get it and da, 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 right? We want to like caveat it so much. Disclaimer is a good word. Yeah. So the content plan was the first bit, right? Like, and then now that's like everywhere. It's like common mainstream language. Every coach has a content plan. And some of them are just stuff they've learned from other people. Some of them they've created. I have no idea. But what I know for sure is that that was entirely unique and was my own creation because it was what I was doing, right? And because I put one paragraph in a messaging opt-in about it and it went crazy, right? Cool. So the next thing is sales. You guys know that I have value-centered sales, which is like a completely unique sales process that I have created and built. It's trademarked. And it's entirely based on what I did. And it's entirely based on my background, both in like the business and fundraising world and my background in therapy. And if you've taken it or been part of it, you know that it's very heavy on the kind of like meeting people where they're at, making it apply to you, overcoming objections in a really like service-based, value-centered, therapist-y kind of way, right? And that was entirely mine. Like all of that was like unique thought. All of that was a unique system, a unique process. I've never heard anybody talk about empowering through objections in the way I do. I've never heard anybody overcome objections in the way I do, quite honestly. Now, is the conversation around empowering through objections out there? Sure. People take the course and people share it. But what I really want to make clear, and I cannot stress this enough, is that that's not a problem. The problem is only there if you're not being a thought leader around that information. But for me, if I share that, right, and then someone else goes out and shares it, that's okay. Like, that is beautiful. That's them furthering my thought leadership, quite honestly. That's them furthering my message. But I think that like sometimes when we create something as a thought leader, we want to like hold it so tight, like i.e. it's mine and now no one can talk about it. Or we hold it so loosely, i.e. like, oh, that must be common knowledge because I see people using that all the time. Like I see the term replicable sales process all the time now. Like it's so funny because I literally Googled the word and like tried to find a bunch of synonyms because I'm like, what's the word for that? Like repeat sales process, no, da, 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 da. And I spent like all this time and finally landed on replicable. And I even remember because I was like, I'm having a hard time saying that, like repeatable, replicable, like it's so funny, but like the problem isn't anyone talking about a replicable, see what I did there? A replicable sales process. The problem is me not owning it enough. The problem would be me not going, hey, this was created completely unique to me from my own ideas, from my own experience, from my own thought leadership. Does that make sense to everybody what the difference is? Like that it's not bad if you create a unique idea and then you see other people talking about it. It's not bad if you create a unique process and then you see that conversation spreading. That is what it means to be a thought leader. And part of being a thought leader is wanting that conversation to spread, but also owning your piece and being in the creation of it. So if you're watching, can you own something for me? Like, what is something that you have created that you're proud of? What's something that you want to step into owning more? Okay, I'm going to give you some more examples, but it's just so important to know it can be both. To know that, like, by being a thought leader, your ideas will be shared often. And to know that that's okay as long as you continue to create ownership over your idea, right? When people share, teach your unique processes, do you desire to be credited, or is it just about owning it to you? I mean, Taylor, here's what I think. I think that if someone's specifically doing it on purpose, I absolutely desire to be credited. But what I think happens is people don't even realize they're doing it or don't even realize it was unique, if that makes sense. Like, so I think it would be easy to like take value-centered sales, and I talk all the time in there about empowering through objections, empowering through objections, empowering through objections, right? And it almost like sinks in, right? That felt so good. Oh, it almost like sinks in, and people don't even realize they're doing it. Like they are not meaning it in a malicious way. They're not using it to like take anything or whatever. I just think that that's what happens because they've heard me say it enough that it sinks in, and it just feels like it becomes like mainstream conversation, replicable sales process, empowering through objections. So I guess my point is I try to draw a pretty open line there in terms of like, think if someone's like fully trying to teach my process 100%, I need credit, but I think that sometimes people don't even realize what's happening or what they're doing. Does that make sense, Taylor? Natalia says, I created a formula that makes it easy for business owners to calculate how to price their products or services for profit. Hell yes. Melanie says she agrees. Amazing. Okay. So the other thing with the sales process too, and I want to just like point this out because I think it's really important. So value-centered sales is super unique. It's trademarked. I think I'm talking about sales in a way nobody else is, but it's not like I don't talk about generic things related to sales too. Like there's a module on following up. Did I create following up? Did I invent following up? Fuck no. Like, fuck no, right? But like the overarching process and everything related to it and the unique thoughts that I'm bringing to it, is that mine? Yes. And so I think that people get very ownership-y over certain things or get very scared to share generic things. And my point is, I don't own following up, but I don't need to not share something that actually works. Right? So like what actually works is following up. So and it works for me and it's something I use. So I'm going to put that in my course, but it doesn't mean that I don't have my own unique spin on that, or that the totality of value-centered sales isn't something uniquely created by me. So I think permission around that too, like it doesn't all have to be the most unique thing ever. But like you have to take ownership over the thoughts around it, right? Just like journaling might not be the most unique thing ever, but like if you have your own process for that, it's still yours. Does that make sense? Taylor says, yes, I see that happening all the time. It's been challenging for me to communicate where that line is for my clients. Yeah, I think it's especially hard with clients because I think that they're bought into you and they're bought into what you're sharing and saying. So it's going to actually happen even more there unintentionally. But I would say like the line is like if they're just using certain words, phrases, specific things. And what I would say the encouragement is there is not like, don't use my shit, but it's like, how can we make this yours, right? How can we make this sound like you? Because that sounds like me, quite honestly, right? Andrea says, I agree, especially when it's a key part of your process. Exactly. Okay, so Natalia's the only one that owns something, you guys. Do not leave her hanging. Someone else share something unique that they can own. Okay, so the sales piece we're good on. The other thing, and this one I really got to take credit for. I'm just going to really take some credit here. Is I was definitely the first person to use like a framework model in my business. So mindset, strategy, and execution, right? Like nobody was doing that. Everybody was like super, super niche, like just do this one thing. And I got into that. Like I just did content. And then I was like, I hate this. Like I need something that's more expansive. I have to figure this out. If I had to put it into terms, what would I say? And I was like, oh my God, this is my niche, is mindset, strategy, and execution, right? And now I feel like everyone's like, what's my framework? What's my framework? What's my framework? And I'm like, loving it, to be quite honest. I think it changed how people are coaching and showing up, and it's given more permission in both niching and like being clear on what you're good at. But 100%, like nobody was doing that when I did that. Like I just was like, I have to pick something else and I have to find something that works. And for me, that's what it is. And I was even saying to my mastermind this morning, like it cracks me up because people will get on discovery calls with me and they're like, okay, so what I really need is mindset, strategy, and execution. And I like giggle to myself because I'm like, yeah, because I've been talking about it for 3 years. You're like, you're in, right? But creating a framework was like just not something that was happening in our space. It wasn't how people were talking about things. They were like, here's my 5-step system, and that was it. And I was like, cool, so I don't do a 5-step system. I guess I'm gonna have to like kind of unniche myself and pick from content rather, and pick something that feels like it fits. And the only thing I could find that felt like it fit was mindset, strategy, and execution, which was entirely based on self-observation, client observation, and just pretty much something I came up with because I was fucking sick of saying I just helped with content, but I needed a way to be specific, right? And that has carried my business. and I think that like it's not just the ownership of MSE, although that's trademarked and that's important. It's the ownership of like, nobody even had frameworks at that point. And I like let myself be different and step into it. So one of the things I want to give you permission for there is like, is there something that's on your heart and calling to you, but you're like, nobody's doing that, so I can't? Because that was me at the time. I was like, are people even going to get this? Like if I go out there and start saying the M.S.E framework, does anybody even have a fucking clue what a framework is? But I stepped into that, and that's why I've been able to create thought leadership in that. And that's why I see so many people in our industry now, like everybody wants a framework. Everybody's trying to figure out their framework. Everybody's trying to come up with their framework. And it's beautiful and amazing, and I fucking love it. That's the difference though, is you have to get into that place where you're like, it's amazing to see this spreading. Like this is true thought leadership. When I see a concept that came entirely from this intuitive nudge because I was experiencing something that didn't feel good, and I stepped into doing something differently, it is so empowering to see that everywhere. Not everywhere, but like to see that spread, right? Like that's what you have to get comfortable with in thought leadership too. But I think the disservice I've maybe done over time is not say enough, hey, that was totally self-created. Does that make sense? So my call to you is don't put yourself in that position. Don't be watching other people say stuff and being like, oh my God, that's amazing that this is spreading, but not owning that you had a part in that, right? So if like Natalia sees other people talking about pricing in that way, it's her job to be like, but I own that I was the first person to do it that way. I own that this was a complete unique thing to me. I own that this was like an intuitive nudge, right? And again, like, it's not to make it wrong that other people are doing it. That is such a fucking gift if you're a thought leader. Like, I think what we miss is we want to be so unique. And so we're like, somebody can't say what I'm saying, or somebody can't do it how I'm doing it. And I think the exact opposite. Like, if you create something that other people want to copy and then you see it spread, there's nothing better as a thought leader than that. Does that make sense? Like, that is such a fucking gift. Such a fucking gift. But your job is to be owning it on the other side of that. Your job is to be going, I see you. I'm so happy you're furthering that amazing thought I had, without diminishing them, without like making that a thing. I think that we try to hold on to our innovative ideas and our uniqueness so tightly that then it becomes like this thing, right? Like where we're watching everybody. We're like, did you get that from me? Did you get that from me? Instead of like, oh my God, I can like have this intuitive nudge and this idea and do it differently than anybody else is doing. And that's it, right? Own the intuitive nudge. Exactly. Melanie says, I have a framework in my videos that sell system and I use my own terms, so it's very unique. I often read or watch people replicating not just the terms, but the ideas. If they are in my circle, clients or students, I find it nice, like they are using and following what I teach. From others who only copy, it's not nice, they should credit at least. Well, so Melanie, I feel like the win there is to figure out what's that line for you. Like if someone directly copied something from one of my programs, they would absolutely hear from me and have multiple times. If someone directly copied something from my content, they would absolutely hear from me and have multiple times. But I think there's a difference between like, do they feel like your thoughts are so mainstream that they're just like running with it? Like, here's the thing I do on accident a lot of times. I really, really love Mike Dooley and I listen to him a lot. And so he says thoughts become things. But for me, that almost feels so mainstream. Like, we all know that, like, thoughts are things, thoughts are things, thoughts are things. But like, I'll say that all the time and not even be like, oh, and I got that from Mike Dooley, because it just feels integrated. It feels like part of it. So like, I'm furthering his thought leadership, but I often forget to say that. So I think there is a line, but if I'm like copying and pasting a fucking piece from his book or some shit into my content, like he better have a problem with me, right? Actually, I don't think he gives two shits if I copy his thing because he's not paying attention to me at all. But like, you see what I mean? Like, I will definitely reach out to people if there's like blatant copying, but I think it's different than like furthering your thought model, right? Yes, Maggie says my word of the year is own, so I love all of this. Yes, of course. So good, so good. Okay, so we got to MSE, and also I got that trademark too. So like the mindset, strategy, and execution trademark lives within a lit up life because it truly is unique, but so was the uniqueness of like even having a coaching framework to begin with, right? Okay, cool. Then next was the partnership. So if you guys know, I started the partnership and have ran it several times. And it's basically where I take on a few clients and instead of doing a paid thing, I do a 20% revenue share, right? We go through a whole process. It's a month long. Probably most of you that have been in this community know that, right? But again, like entirely unique, entirely my idea. And I've had many people reach out to me since then and been like, hey, I had someone who I really wanted to work with and they just like couldn't make the money work. And so I used your partnership model with them. Amazing, right? I don't know anybody that's doing it in like a full out way that I am or really incorporate it into their business model. And we'll talk about that. But like seeing that idea get used in other ways is again such a gift, but I have to own that that was my idea. Like I was literally sitting in the bathtub and I was like, oh my God, this is how I'm going to do coaching. However, and this is important, it's not like that wasn't inspired in some way. Does that make sense? Like what happened is I was probably watching Shark Tank. I don't specifically remember, but certainly I'm sure I was. And then I decided to apply it to coaching. So it's not like I like created this thing out of thin air, out of the blue, kind of like I was saying about following up. Obviously, that's part of my process, you know? So there are these ways where like we have to own our thought leadership in that too. Like I could downplay that and be like, well, you know, it's kind of like a Shark Tank idea. No, the fuck it wasn't. It was certainly inspired by that, but it was like entirely intuitive based, and I have to own that I brought that into the coaching space. Does that make sense? Iva says, I think we obsess over doing everything the most effective way, that we overcomplicate things, and then perfection stands in our way, and it's hard to get that moment of letting go and just putting shit out imperfectly. Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's very true. Melanie says, yes, that's what I mean when they copy and paste. If it's people using it, I love it. Totally. Yeah, copy and paste is a hell no. Taylor says, how do you reach out to people when you see blatant copying? I mean, I'm just honest. Like, I'll just pull where they copied it from, pull what they said, and be like, hey, so I'm not sure if this was intentional or not. I'm assuming it wasn't because I would assume you wouldn't intentionally copy, but this was actually directly from my program. Please take it down or please credit me or whatever. This was from, you know, XYZ place. And 9 times out of 10, people are going to be like, oh, fuck, and do it because they don't want to get sued. And sometimes they didn't even do it purposely. If they don't, I mean, I would definitely take further action. I think being a business owner that like owns your shit is part of that, right? Like where I'm not just going to let people like full on copy and paste from all my programs, but like normally just reaching out and being like, hey, here's what's up. I'm assuming you didn't do this on purpose, but we got to crack this. It is enough to do the trick, in my opinion. Andrew says, I created Unbridled Leadership, which is the process that empowers and enables women to lead like women to lead like women, in a sustainable and holistic way by letting go of the pressure to conform to outdated norms and structures of male-centric leadership. So good. I love that. Hey, Jen, thank you for catching me live. Hey, Monica, it's totally okay to be late. Appreciate you even coming. So back to the partnership. Yes. So what I've seen is other people start to use that model. But again, it was like influenced, and that's okay. Certainly, I'm sure Shark Tank was in my brain, but like I have to own my thought leadership in pulling that into the coaching space, right? And then the second piece of that to own is this idea of even making one-on-one scalable. Like when I first came into this industry, and pretty much ever since, there's this whole idea of one-on-one's not scalable, one-on-one's not scalable, one-on-one's not scalable. Everyone says that, right? And I feel like by putting the revenue percentage into my coaching, so basically I have a base rate and then my clients pay 10% of the new revenue they generate with me on top of it, it is scalable, right? Because I get clients that are further and further along in their businesses and they have bigger and bigger opportunities, and I get better and better at coaching them through stuff. And so the 10% grows and grows and grows and has only continued to grow, right? And so what I want to own about that is not only did I have the partnership idea, but then I figured out how to incorporate it into my business model and how to make one-on-one scalable and actually fit me. I don't see anyone really doing that, but certainly, and I'm positive that I will, that's going to spread. But it's like my fucking job to own, like, I brought that into the coaching space, and not in an ownership way of so you can't do it, but in an ownership way of like, I own my thoughts and I own my leadership around that and I own my ideas. And that's a gift. And I think part of the other piece of this, I don't know if I'm jumping around, but I think you guys are following. Part of the other piece of this is don't be afraid to give other people credit too. Because I think that in this industry, we make it wrong to give other people credit. Like, I feel like I talk about Carolyn Elliott all the motherfucking time. If you guys want to go check out Carolyn Elliott, that is not a problem for me. You absolutely should. I love to share podcasts with my community. So much stuff. Like, I talk about Mike Dooley all the time. Whoever, like, give your people credit. That's not bad. That makes you smart, right? Like, I think that we will take a course and then, like to Melanie's point, like instead of crediting the course and being like, Melanie's awesome, we're like acting like it's ours. So, if you want to do something, don't be afraid. Actually, I sent this to Maggie, but I just listened to, I love Chair Expert podcast, Dax Shepard, and John Gottman was on there. And he's a marriage expert, if you don't know. He's amazing. He does such amazing research. He's a super smart psychologist. And most of the interview, he's crediting other research, other studies, other people's books, other work, other whatever. And it doesn't downplay him at all, And it's what helps you own your unique ideas, because you're willing to give other people credit. So you're willing to own yours. Does that make sense? So like if someone else were to use the partnership or the scalable one-on-one model, like they wouldn't have a downside in being like, and I got this from Lacey Seitz, who's seen it play out in really successful ways for her. So we're trying it. That's great. Like, you're not devaluing yourself by giving value to someone else, just like you would expect someone to give that value to you, right? Natalia says, yes, you're the only coach I know who says one-on-one is scalable. Thank you. Love that. Maggie says, yes, I quote John Gottman all the time. Exactly. Like, he quotes other people, you quote him. It's like that's not bad. That is being a thought leader, is knowing when to own your shit and knowing when to defer to other people. So like in Sarah and I's course, Happy Magic, there's one thing that's completely and entirely inspired by Carolyn Elliott, and every page of it is like taken from Carolyn Elliott here, taken from Carolyn Elliott here. I have no fucking problem. So the podcast was definitely inspired by Esther Perel in the sense that I love that she like clips in and is like, here's why I'm saying what I'm saying. Here's why I'm sharing in this way. And I totally incorporated that into the podcast, but I did put like a unique spin on it, and that we're doing the same client for 6 months and just nobody else is doing that. Like, it just doesn't exist, right? And so again, like, I want to be clear that you can be inspired by someone else's experience, their thought leadership, their stuff. You can use their ideas, you can further their thought leadership, but know that there comes a time and a place to both create and own yours, right? Create and own yours. And that's what's so important, because if you're not putting a stake on that, if you're not owning that, nobody else is going to. Nobody else is going to be like, oh, remember when Lacey was the first one to have a podcast like that? Ain't nobody doing that for me. Nobody's going to be like, remember when Lacey was the first person to make one-on-one scalable? Nobody's doing that for me. It is my fucking job to own that and say it often and a lot. Sorry, guys. Thank you for coming back. If you're back, say hi. I love and appreciate you. So I hope that makes sense. It really is this idea of like owning your innovation and uniqueness, right? With it being okay that someone else sharing some of your innovation and uniqueness furthers your thought leadership. But also I think we have to stop feeling like we can't give other people credit. Like I just see so few people in this industry sharing who's inspired them. Hi, Maggie, thank you. I see so few people in this industry sharing who's inspired them, who they got an idea from, and it feeling like it would be shameful if they did. And I just think it's the total opposite. Like I think we have to open the door to owning our own shit more and being okay with crediting other people, because that's how we become better thought leaders, in my opinion. That's how, like the rising tide lifts all ships thing, like that really is how this continues to happen, right? And so hopefully that is a call to you that like it's not something you have to hold on to tightly, like, but you do have to own your own stuff. And the last piece I want to say about that, well, there's two. Isn't there always two? Okay, the pieces I want to say about that are that it's not like I'm truly saying something unique 80% of the time, you guys. Like I'm definitely talking about fundamental business concepts that are just true and work and whatever, right? So like the ownership of this is not to say like I'm amazing and I'm always doing something so unique and I'm perfect, right? It's to say these are the handful of things that I own in my business. And by the way, I've been in business for nearly 4 years, like I said. And I probably had 4 fucking good ideas that whole time. I mean, how many did I list here? I don't even know. I think I said content plan, sales, MSE, partnership, podcast. So I maybe had like 5 good ideas that entire time. Like we don't need to hold ourselves accountable to having everything be unique. 80% of the time, I'm probably talking about stuff that every other person is talking about because it just fundamentally works and it's true and it's good business, right? But like the 20% where I'm like creating these unique ideas and like really bringing unique thought leadership to the table, I have to own that. And it's my full-time job to make sure that people know that and that I own that piece of it, instead of being disappointed when I see it running around and being like, oh, but like I did that because it makes me want to hold on tight, when I'm like, oh my God, it's so beautiful to see my ideas spreading. That's when I step even more into my thought leadership, right? So again, I'm not saying something unique 80% of that time, 80% of the time, and it's okay if you're not either. But the 20% that you are, you have to step into that, right? And then the second piece, which I kind of already just said, but was that idea of like, it's not like I'm having, you know, like unique, innovative ideas 24/7. It's not a thing. I've had like 4 or 5 over the course of being in business for almost 4 years, you know? And so don't feel like, oh, fuck, like now I need to go figure out like, how do I bring all this uniqueness to the table? You don't. But my advice there would be to give yourself time and permission to think, instead of always filling your head with other people's ideas. Like the way to become a thought leader is to have time to think, right? The way to become a thought leader is to watch your own process and what's working and have enough time to process that. And I think that's missing so much. We're just constantly filling our heads with other people's ideas, and then they seep in and we find ourselves talking about them and we're like, huh, interesting. We don't even realize we're doing it. So my advice would be, listen to other people a little bit less and listen to yourself a little bit more. Be really conscious of taking that time to spend time thinking, to spend time creating your own thought leadership, to spend time looking at your own stuff, right? Because the only really amazing ideas I've had were because of that. And the piece that's true about that too is like, I've said this before on a live, but we're going to say it again because it's important, which is, if you look at most of the people you look up to, right? They had their own unique way they created success. they're not going like, oh, I built my $1 million business because I followed so-and-so and so-and-so's 5-step system. Like, I just don't see that anywhere in any of the people I look up to, right? And so what happens is we get so invested in like, well, that's how they got successful, so I'm going to copy their system, their thought leadership rather, you know, and step into that. But it's like, that's not how most of the people we love and look up to are getting successful. They're getting successful because they are developing their own thought leadership. They are developing like their own models, their own thought process, their own way of doing things. And then they're stepping into that and then they're selling that. Do you know what I mean? Like when they're selling, here's my 5-step system, it's because they created a 5-step system. When we're only putting in other people's stuff all the time, we can't create our own 5-step system because we're trying to do everyone else's. And then that's when we're like stuck in this middle ground of feeling like, why can't I get to the next level? So I'm not bringing enough of my own thought leadership to the table, quite honestly, right? Maggie says, yes, time to think is so important. I used to resist rest. And when I'm resting, I get the best ideas. Absolutely. Taylor says, there is this awesome podcast about this on the Life Coach School with Brooke Steele called Super Thinking. It's epic. Ooh, Super Thinking. I'm gonna have to check that out. Thank you, Taylor. I assume what you mean is like just about taking time to think, right? I love that. And I think that that's so true here, which is like all of the, like Maggie said, the time I took to think about what is my sales process actually and how am I replicating it and how do I share that was so valuable because it made me a thought leader. The time I took to sit in the bathtub and go like, what am I doing about fixing all these entry barriers in the coaching industry? And then having the model, the partnership model come up. The time I spent to think about like, how am I scaling one-on-one because I'm done with the idea that it's not scalable. All of those have been the best and most valuable things in my business. So again, but that's like 20%. We're talking 4 good ideas in 4 years kind of thing. So don't feel like, oh, fuck, now I have to go like create all my own unique ideas. This is so stressful, but also feel like I can open the door for that. I can open up the door for me a little more, other people a little bit less. And I can open up the door to the fact that like other people may then run with my ideas. Other people may take them, but that is thought leadership. That is furthering your ideas. So for me, my job now, and your job too, and all my clients' jobs that I've been talking to this about, is owning it so that when your thought spreads, you feel ownership and excitement over that. When you're going to feel triggered is when you're like, oh, I haven't been owning that, so nobody even knows that was my unique idea. I haven't been owning that, so nobody even knows that I'm part of that conversation, quite honestly, right? And so this is my call to you to go do your own your shit live stream and be like, here are all the things I'm bringing to the table. Here are all the things I'm amazing at. Here are all the things I've created that have been completely and utterly unique to me over however long in my business, even if it's one thing, you know what I mean? But you have to be the one waving your own flag, advocating for your own ideas, stepping into your own ownership. And it doesn't mean it's not scary. Again, this is one of the scariest live streams I've ever done because what I just did was brag for whatever 40 fucking minutes about how awesome and unique I am. And here's the second reason why that's scary, because can someone find someone who maybe said something about mindset strategy and well, that's probably a bad example. Maybe about content plans before I did? Probably. But the truth is that was never on my radar. That was completely self-created and unique. So it's not like I'm owning this to like say that it's not possible that anyone's ever had an idea before me. I think it's sort of like the big magic type thinking where that's possible. But what I am saying is like these were all self-created and that's the difference maker. These were all unique ideas and that's the difference maker, right? And I think that you have to give yourself the opportunity to create those kind of things in your business if you want to grow, if you want to go far, if you want to be a thought leader, if you don't want to be the person following the 5-step system, but the person creating it, right? Like this is how you get to your next level, but it requires a lot of confidence, a lot of self-assuredness, and a lot of ownership. And so your job is to create the space to think about it and then step into owning it. So hope that was helpful for you. I hope that you'll continue to see me do this in new ways. I feel like, again, the current way I'm doing that is through the podcast. It doesn't mean that it wasn't inspired in other ways, but it certainly does mean that I have to be the one going, there's no podcast like this. Nobody's ever done a podcast like this. Nobody's ever done a podcast like this. There's no podcast like this. Because if I'm not, nobody else is going to like make sure everybody knows that. You know what I mean? But P.S., there's no other podcast like this, so you should listen. It's called Literally. It's amazing. I have just, again, been loving your feedback. So I hope that you guys go listen to that. I hope that, that serves you. But I hope that more than that, you create some space for your own ideas and your own time. And I hope that if you've already done that, that you go create space to do a live stream like this and own your shit too. I hope that if you're listening right now, that you're going to make a comment and tell me what you're owning, whether you're live or the replay. But there's just nothing more valuable than being your own advocate and stepping into your own thought leadership in that way. And it can be hard and it can be scary and it can be the not comfortable thing to do, to be like, I'm so unique and innovative and here's why. But again, you got to be on the front lines of that, right? And so I hope you will take time to do that this week. Again, if you're watching or listening to the replay, tell me what you're owning and tell me if you're going to do a live or a post owning it. And I love you guys. Thank you for being here, for watching this, for listening to me brag, for supporting me. I just appreciate you guys so, so, so much and hope you go create your own space this week. All right. Oh, and new podcast episode comes out Wednesday. So be on the lookout for that. All right. Love you guys. Happy Monday. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye.